Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. We're really happy to have Jane Conner-Ziser with us today, and we're going to get started in just a second. You're all going to learn a lot from Jane about her process on planning and creating images that can definitely get you some good results in competition printing. I have watched Jane over the years, and I've learned a lot, and I've picked up some tips, and I have borrowed some of her techniques for some of my portrait edits that have come in very handy. Jane is a Canon Explorer of Light. She's an X-Rite Coloratti. She's all over the place. She's a master at Photoshop. She's a wonderful photographer, and we're honored to have her with us today.
The dress being in black and white, it was going fairly monochromatic and everything, and I thought, this is going to be prettier if I open it up. So the lesson learned from that is to leave your options open. Shoot raw so that you can go back in and do something wonderful with it later. I also thought that since it was kind of monochromatic, I'd like to kind of explore what it was going to look like in black and white. And in this particular case, if I wanted to have a lot of leeway and work with the different value tones in this, as well as the different luminosities of specific colors, you might go into your hue and saturation and take the saturation of all of your colors like this, because the different colors have their own luminosities or values as well. So now that I've got this desaturated in hue and saturation back here, I can begin working with my exposure in light and dark. Now the other thing is I get an overall value that I like here, but you have to understand that you must have detail. In a black and white in particular, you want to have detail throughout the image, and I'm getting in danger here of losing some of my detail in these white areas, and the black areas here, this is black velvet, which is also a big challenge, but in the size of her hair and things like this too, I want to make sure that I have some detail. And since I went a little bit lighter with this, I may decide that I don't want it quite so dramatic. So here I can work with the highlights, and I can begin moving the highlights down, and as I do that, I hope that you can see that I'm getting more detail into these white areas in here. And in bringing the shadows up, you can see that I'm also raising and getting a little bit more detail into her hair. Now, specifically for colors, if I want to go back into the hue and saturation window, I can go into the luminance of these colors and begin bringing up. If I bring up the orange, do you see how that changes just the color in her skin? See? I can begin lightening that up a little bit in the yellows here. And I can bring other colors specifically down. So through a combination of working in the basic window with the overall exposure, you can even work with the overall color temperature in here to get more detail. I work very, very specifically on this image to make sure that I had all the detail that I felt that I wanted and needed to have in this as a black and white image before I opened it up in Photoshop. And I'll just cancel this now and bring it up in Photoshop over here and go into this next view of this image, which was this one. And you can see that what I've done here at this point is this is the black and white that I was able to achieve with that. And you can see that it looks really creamy, and it looks a lot different. It's not as sharp as the other one, is it? And that's because I did add a special effect to this after it came up. I did add a little bit of formerly Nick, but now Google Color Effects Pro. What I added on this was a little bit of the Midnight, which was one of my favorites. Should open right up here and drop down into Midnight, and just took the general Midnight one. You can see how creamy it is like this, and I applied it fairly heavily just in a default setting, and you can see that right now we're losing the detail that we have in the black areas here, but what I did is just back this all the way off to 0, and I just brought it up just a hint, just like maybe 12%. That was it. And what the difference is in that is it added a little bit of softening and creaminess to the image. So when you're using the special effects, I would recommend that you go ahead and apply them pretty heavily and then back off on the opacity, and also choose different blending modes to apply them in. Like you have different blending modes through here that you could use, such as some of my favorites might be like multiply or luminosity or just color or overlay or soft light, something like that. Now this image is here, is what I wanted to show you is that I also from here, let me just flip this one back off again so we won't be too confused here. From here you saw that I changed the angle of it, because once I was looking at this I was thinking that it was looking like a flower, but I wasn't. I was focusing on her head and feet, so I wanted to rotate it around until I was getting the sense of it being a flower without it looking too contrived or hokey. Now, at first glance, I think that maybe I'd like it to be straight up and down, because when you do it straight up and down like this, and see I've removed part of the shadow from around here as well to make that work, it really does look like a flower now. But in a very abstract sense, it looks like a ballerina. So I literally took this and I did work with this all the way around, where I took my little ballerina and I just kind of moved her around in circles and looked at her from every angle conceivably possible to come up with the angle that I liked the best. This one was interesting to me as well. I kind of liked it like that too, but I thought, man, that one might be a little bit more daring, whereas just kind of up in the angle that I ended up with up here, I felt that it gave me a really nice little look for a flower. And down here, notice how I managed to try keep as much as possible the detail in the hair here, in the back, and also in the bow. There was no detail in the black velvet, and I will say that when the image came up for the final judging, and it did score well, there was a lot of discussion about the detail in that black bow, and the only thing that saved me on it was that a couple of the judges realized it was black velvet and it wasn't an issue to them, and they felt that the composition of this held up well without it. So, you know, I was lucky on it at some point, and also it came up at the right period of time. I chose to display this. They have their own, this was for the Professional Photographers of America, and they have their parameters for height and width and resolution and everything. So I composed it on this paper so that in the rule of thirds, that if you drop down here just a little thing like this, I'll just pick a little color here. I divide this up in like the little tic-tac-toe board here, like this. You can see roughly here that in this area here is where that rule of thirds is going to be. And so I positioned her up there on the top just like that, and so that it fit well in here to balance out very well in a compositional sense. I did have to do a little bit of cleanup on the background here. There were some little bits of dust here and there on the background. I chose to leave the shadow in, which I dusted it off a little bit down here, so you can see it's a lot softer at this end than that. That was done just by using a paintbrush. I want to get to some other images here too, where I just chose the color here and about 10% opacity, just kind of fluffed in, and you see it just kind of took the edge off where I wanted the edge to go off, and still made it look very natural, like the shadow. So just kind of made it delicate. I decided to go with the graceful, delicate aspects of the image, and so everything that I was thinking throughout the creation of this was graceful and delicate. And so even to the presentation, the graceful, delicate presentation of just a single bit of piping around the outside edges. So that's how this image was created, and I'll close it up, or I'll just kind of browse in a few others in here. If there's any big questions on this one, I can take them now, or I can continue to move on.
Actually, Jane, there were a couple of questions. One was, how did you deal with the shadow while you were spinning the subject?
The shadow when I was spinning the subject. Okay, what I did, and let's just kind of go back here, and I'm just going to do exactly what I did. Let me see. All right, but here. Okay, when I was positioning her on this piece of paper, I have it like this. Let me just go ahead and do one thing here. I want to take this piping out. Oop. Just so it won't confuse people, because that piping does get in the way. All right, so I brought her in, and then in a free transform, I just began to rotate her around until I got her where I wanted her to be. Now, let's just say I wanted to go with this other crop here. All right, so I wanted her to be more straight up and down. And what the question was, what did I do with the shadow to get rid of it? What I would always do to get rid of shadows would be to add a layer mask to this. And in this case, I would probably come up very close to her. I'm using black as a foreground color. I have a layer mask here. And then at 100% opacity, I can come in with white paint. And what this is actually doing here is it's hiding what is on this layer. And if I swap over to the white paint, I can paint back what was on the layer. So if I were wanting to really just take the shadow completely out, I'd probably just fluff it in like this. And because this is such a soft image and I don't need to have a specific edge to this, I could just come in here with little smaller brushes and just kind of pop in just around the edge of my subject like that. There's a lot of different ways of making selections and dealing with them in Photoshop, and if you need to have a specific selection, a really perfect line, I would recommend that you go with the pen tool. You know, for something soft on the edge, you can go with just a little bit of the brush tool and the layer mask. Now I'm exposing what's underneath this layer here, so let me just kind of cover all that up for you so you don't have to deal with that either. Okay. So what have we got? Oh, I'm putting it in. Okay, there you go. So that would have just been the little edge on that one that I could have done. See, that looks interesting to me, but I don't think it would score as high. I think that it's a little too abstract for conservative judges, and you have to consider who the judges are going to be on the panel or what type of judges you're going to have. And the Professional Photographers of America is it's a contemporary association as well, but you still get a lot of very classic judges on that, and so I went with a safer composition by doing something more like that. Does that answer the question?
I think that did a pretty good job. One other question, a couple folks asked this. What is your feeling about, in judging, are judges seemingly against a solid black? Why do you find it important to keep some detail in the deep blacks?
Particularly if it's a black and white image, one of the attributes of beautiful black and white is the gradation, a delicate gradation of tonality. Now, I don't believe that you have to have black. You have to have detail in areas that really don't need detail. But you still have to show that you have got a finesse of understanding what a beautiful monochromatic image looks like, and to know where you should have detail and not. For instance, if this little dress, and they did come up and look at this pretty closely even on the file, if it didn't have any detail in these areas here, or if she didn't have detail in the specular highlight on her back, that would have scored a much lower score. It probably would not have even merited. I guess, you know, in contemporary photography, you can use blacks as drama and things like that, but there is a line, there's kind of a fine line that separates deliberately not having detail in certain areas because it's a creative choice and you didn't need it, or not having the mastery of gradual tonality within a monochromatic image. Does that answer the question?
I think it certainly did. I've experienced the same thing. Why don't we continue on and we'll pick up some more questions towards the end.
Okay, well, let me close this one. I'll go through a couple of other images. So I kind of just made a folder of a lot of exhibition images just for us to kind of look at. Some of them scored better than others, and so let's go up here into our little folder up here that I set up for us here, our little exhibition images here. I'm going to kind of close that up, make a little smaller window on the side here. So this one is a real interesting image to kind of look at, and I'll open this one up. Some of them I have PSDs on and some of them I don't. This I've never entered in competition, although I love the image. And I just love the tonality of the image. I love the colors of the image. This would not score well in competition. And I'm sure if you guys are looking at it as I am, you're going to know that no matter what I do with this image, it's not going to take care of her arm here. So do you see how her arm just kind of like shoots down into the bed? You know, that is not going to happen. The original on this one looks like this. Okay. So, and a beautiful model and a beautiful location and everything. And so you can see that you've got some of the pillow sham coming out from the back of her head over here. So on this first layer here that I've worked on, you can see that I've solved that problem a little bit over there. And then her feet are a little bit cut off. I can even get past that by, you know, fluffing on a beautiful vignette, you know, and that kind of brings in and really brings a nice, beautiful quality into that. And then this next layer over here, I added a little bit more tonality down behind her shoulder like that. So she's really kind of well conceived that way. And then this top layer here is the retouching that I did. And you can see that I worked on her little armpit there and her hair and stuff like this. This is also one of my images. And as much as I love the image, it's not going to, I know it's not going to go because of the arm. So you do have to be careful of how you cut off different pieces of people's bodies, and you kind of have to know when you can get away with something and when you can't. You can camouflage like I did, you can camouflage the ankles, or I could get away with that, but there's nothing you can do about that arm. And so we'll go through a couple more in here. This one here, I liked this image a lot. This one just scored average, like just like like 80, 82-ish or something like that. I like the image a lot and everything. I don't think that it was as interesting to them as some of the others. The lighting was pretty on it, same model. You can see what I did on this one is I've recomposed it slightly and cleaned up a lot of the cement. And I put her down in the frame to give her a little bit more weight. And again, she's on the left third of this so that she has a lot more room in front of her eyes than behind her head. And really nice time of day here for that one. Like I said, I scored like 80, 82 or something like that. It wasn't, you know, top scoring image. Some images, you know, the reason that the little ballerina scored as well as it did is because it had a quality to it that was kind of ethereal, you know, so a lot of other things can be just pretty pictures, you know, and there can be a lot of different ways of looking at them. This one I liked a lot. This one was right in the 82 range around in there. I love the design of this one a lot, and it's one of those images that you like to say, well, I thought it was going to score much higher. You know, of course, I did if I entered it, you know. But it was right around the 82-ish and everything. And oh, and as you can see, there is not a lot of detail in the blacks in here, and I don't know if that counted against it or not, but there wasn't. And two photographers will look at things in different ways. This image here, this was done during another play date, one with me and another good friend of mine, Rick Bauer, who was a Jacksonville photographer. This was mine, and this was his. So you can see that two photographers are going to look at things in a very different way. He saw this as a kind of a richly colored image with a deep blue canvas backing to it, the eyes closed, very moody, beautiful three-quarter view of the face, and he had the gentleman kind of he didn't like the fingers, so he had him kind of make little fists of his hands and stuff like that, and that was his take on it. This was mine, where you can see I shot around a little bit more to the front. Still have three-quarter views of the face, but I went around to the front. I have a lower camera angle. Also, I'm a much shorter photographer, but so that might be part of it. But I saw it as an extremely low-key image, and I liked the fingers, so I had the fingers open and I had the arm raised up. Very subtle differences. They're both nice poses. Rick didn't enter his. I entered mine, and it got an 82, I think, or something like that. And one of the criticisms of this was that there were too many fingers in it. I felt they all had the fingers, but I didn't find that they were really objectionable. Another one here, the three different views here of one of Rick's images that I put together for him, a pink background, white, and very pale. Just the presentation that you make on these will make a lot of difference in how people perceive those images. This one here is one of my favorites. I love this. This is one of Rick Bauer's images, and it scored maybe an 80, 81, and I think it's just because it was simple. You know, it is beautiful. I find it beautiful. And I love the colors in it, and I love the pose, I love the look in the face, but they didn't find it spellbinding. And, you know, I think that for most exhibitions, you can do good, clean photography, and you can merit, you can get in there and get up to that, you know, between the 80 and 84, you know, category, you know, 80, 81, 82, 83, somewhere around in there. You know, really great, good, clean photography should get you there. But if you want to shoot up into those 90s, and if you want to get into loans and things like that, you have to really have some quality to it that just really grabs the judges and makes them, you know, go, oh my gosh, you know. This is another one here. I'll open both of these up, and you can take a peek at them. This is one, I haven't entered it yet, but I just want to show you different looks that you can get from the same picture. This is of a young model that I love to work with in Jacksonville, Marco. And this is actually a between shot thing, and he was checking his cell phone for the messages from his girlfriend and all. He's got a great face to work with. But when I was playing with it, I kind of came up with this, which I'm thinking is at some point down here is going to have some potential with it. It started out as when I made it the black and white, it was like this, and then I'm doing some basic retouching and a little bit of HDR on it because I wanted to work with the textures and things. I floofed his hair out a little bit more with the liquify, and I made it more of a mid-tone. I took a lot of the blacks out of it, and I really worked on the structures and things like that. I did it with a Silver Effects Pro, and the formerly Nick and now Google software, and then I also added a little structure in the Vivesa to it. And for his face, coming in here on his face, you can see I did a little bit of retouching, dye work on his nose area in particular, and beard. If you're going to add effects like this in HDR, I generally will do most of my retouching afterwards because I don't know what it's all going to come out and look like at the end and how much I'm actually going to have to do. And then here I decided this is a little bit of, I put a little curve adjustment on here to give it just a little bit more contrast into the blacks. I thought I had maybe flattened it out just a little bit too much on there. And then this is just a little camera lens distortion, a little perspective thing, because I felt that my camera angle was showing his hands and legs were a little bit too big in comparison to his head. So I just kind of made a perspective shift on that to bring it down a little bit. I may yet finish this up. It's a contender that I'm kind of looking at. And the thing I like about it is it's got a nice moodiness to it, a lot of good textures to it. It's a nice composition on here, and it's a very natural act for a young man his age to be doing, and his hands look decent doing it, and he's got a decent expression on his face as well. And that, of course, came from that, which is basically a snapshot, because it was. What else do we have in here? This one, here's another one of him. I just want to show you some retouching and things and different options that you can go in. This one I like a lot. He's got a great face, doesn't he? This is the before of this one. So this is just general butterfly lighting, soft butterfly lighting and everything. And but what I like to do with my retouching on people's faces is bring attention up. I like to bring light up into the eye area and the cheekbone area, and lights all from, say, the nose area up in this area right here when I'm working on a face, and that's going to add so much lift to it. And you can see the retouching that I did here is I dropped his shoulder down a little bit. I did a little retouching on the neck. I sculpted the lighting on the face to kind of accentuate the bone structure. That was all done with the dodging and boning tools. And then with the eye enhancement, If you guys want to see any of these techniques, I'm happy to show you, so just ask for them, okay? There's the eye enhancements here. And that bringing in the contrast, what I'm doing is enhancing the contrast, making the blacks a little blacker, the whites a little whiter. I'm enhancing the contrast, the color. I added some color to the irises of his eyes, and the detail, where I added a few extra eyelashes and hairs into his eyebrow area as well. So whenever you want to accentuate something, it's the contrast, color, and detail. And then I added a few other enhancements to this as well. You can see that I did a lot of highlighting in his hair. This was done with screen blending mode, painted in with a layer mask. It also brings some light up into this area. You see the combination of the two really light him up. And so that I do that specifically to try to get a little bit of extra impact into the expression of my subjects. And then here I did a little brilliance and warmth here. It's kind of here. I like it cropped different than it is right now. But you can see that I'm kind of bringing out, I don't know if you can see that, just right here, where you can see the blues get a little bluer, the reds get a little bit redder. It's not really a saturation. It's a brilliance and warmth in the nick thing. And then I added a black and white on here. And then I did a slight color bounce to the black and white to make it a little warmer instead of just a cool black and white. I did that. And then to top it off, I added just a little bit of texture back in here with the vivacious structure. So you see it coming from there to there. I'm working on him as an angel. I think he's going to make a great angel. We doing okay on questions, Joe?
Yeah, you started a landslide here.
I started a landslide. Okay. Do they want to see some facial retouching?
They're really interested in some of the details about editing the eyes. I'm sorry,
Okay.
my catch lights, that kind of thing.
All right. I was wondering if that was going to come up. Okay, let's just do a little bit here. We'll start right out just like that, okay? So on this one, you can see I did a little bit of the editing here. So what I'm going to do, what I normally do is when I open my file, is I will duplicate the background, and I create a background copy. And so I'll start with him just on what I normally did here. What I did do on him is I used the dodging and burning tools. I use the dodging and burning tools in the mid-tone range. The exposure is going to be at 5%. Okay, and then protect tones is not checked. So I have the dodge tool here, and what the dodge tool is going to allow me to do is to kind of come through here, and anything that I see on him that looks like a little bit dark, I can just kind of color over like this. And I prefer to use the dodging and burning tools for this because they're so soft. I can dodge all the way to white. I can burn all the way to black. I get very little discoloration, and when I do get a slight amount of discoloration, which I may get on this little bite on his neck here, I can correct it very easily. So you can see just by working with different sizes of brushes, and the brush size should be slightly smaller than the area that you're working on, like that. And so once I got the area smooth, then if I use the brush tool in color blending mode at about 10% opacity and 100% flow, if I have a discoloration, I can choose the color I would prefer to see in that area by holding down the Option or Alt key and tapping on the better skin tone, and then just fluff that color right over that area, just like that. Okay? So basically his entire face was done like that. I'll do the burn tool here where he has a little bit of light coming around, little sweat marks underneath his eyes and things like this. You can just kind of come in and just, you know, take the little highlight down a little bit like that. And I'm going to sculpt over by the side of his nose. Everybody has to look good. I don't use plugins like a lot of people I know use portraiture and things like this. I don't do that because I want to maintain a lot of pore structure. You know, if you look at his skin tones here, he's got great pore structure everywhere. He doesn't look like he's been retouched. He doesn't have a blurry skin tone anywhere. And that's important for me because I want my subjects to look like they're natural looking. And you do have shortcuts between the dodging and burning tools. You know, if you can start out with the dodge tool here, if I want to just kind of take this little one out like this, and I'm working with this particular sized brush, and you know, let's just say that I want to burn this area down. If you hold the Option or Alt key down while you're working, you can see that you're accessing the burning tool, but even though it's not changing over here, I am still burning. So I go around the face, I do a little bit of burning here, and then I release the Option or Alt key, and then do a little bit of dodging here. And I kind of work around following the contour of the bone structure of the face and to shape the skin. And we only have an hour, so and I probably spent about 15 minutes on his face to get it to this point, like that. But there's no blurring or anything with it. Now the eyes, okay? The eyes are done in a series of layers, and you can see these are all the layers that I used to do the eyes. And recreating that, what I would do here is start out with, I've got little catch lights from one eye to the other, and I want them to be kind of the same. I think I did. I changed them all together. Look at that. Okay. I'll start out by we'll make a layer here. Let's just kind of do it like I normally would. I'm going to start with the whites of the eyes. So I'll make a layer, just a plain empty layer, and I'll use the brush tool in normal mode. The opacity is going to be 20%, and the flow is going to be 100%. And then I'm using white paint, and I'm going to come over and position a brush that's a little bit big for the area, and I'm putting it right down to the bottom of the iris. And I'm just going to get even closer here. Normally you want to see both eyes at the same time, and then I'm just going to puff in some paint, just like that. And I use white paint because it's opaque, and because it is going to allow me to use it in a very low opacity, so the natural color of the white of the eye will eventually show through. So once again, just puff, 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 puff. And then a little smaller brush on the other side, puff, puff, puff. Then we're going to add a layer mask. And we're going to use the brush tool with black paint at 100% opacity and 100% flow, and choose a smaller brush, which will give us a sharper edge as I decide to clean off the overspray from the irises and the lid lines and lashes. Like that. These are very simple. All my retouching techniques are very simple. They can be done in almost any version of Photoshop, and they're just easy, simple techniques. So now we've got the whites of the eyes, and what I would do is back up so I can see the entire face, and then we can reduce the opacity to 0, and then bring it back just until you get as much as you need to have. Then for the catch lights, come in like this, and I'm going to make another new layer. And then at 100% opacity and 100% flow, I can puff in a little catch light in both eyes, just like that. And I think I did 2 on him. Didn't I do 2? I've got a couple of them in there, see? I did a couple of little catch lights. Then I can make a little smaller brush over here, and I'll just hit a little spot there and a little spot there. And then we can reduce the layer opacity here to 0, and then bring it up until you like it a little bit. And now I'd like to accentuate the center of the catch lights a little bit more. So I'll make another new layer, a little slightly bigger brush, and I'll just hit the center of this catch light a little bit, just like that. And then reduce that opacity to 0 and bring it up just until I get the sparkle of the eye. Then the iris color, you can paint it in just like this and use the layer mask as I've done before. Or you can do screen blending mode. And the way you would do that is you would go down to the image adjustment layer icon at the bottom of the layers window and choose, I usually choose levels. It doesn't really matter, but because we're not going to make an adjustment here. And we just close it up. And all I wanted was the image adjustment layer here associated with the layer mask. And so now I can take the layer blending mode from normal, and I can move it to screen. And you see that I get a lighter exposure of my picture. This lighter exposure, I'm then going to hide behind a layer mask just by turning this white layer mask to black, and that could be image, adjust, invert, or you could use the keyboard shortcut Command or Control I. And then, using white paint and the brush tool at 20% opacity and 100% flow, I can come in directly opposite the catch light and towards the bottom, and I can brush in this lighter exposure. I like to paint with a lesser opacity because it allows me to build up the value more gradually and have better control over my edges. To maintain the crisp detail edge on the edge of the pupil, we're going to reverse the foreground and background colors here to have black as the foreground color. And then at 100% opacity and flow, I'll take a smaller brush for an even sharper edge, and I can paint that pupil back in again. So all I'm doing is removing that lighter exposure from the pupil area. Backing out, then we're going to be able to reduce the layer opacity to 0, and then bring it back up until we get just the right light in the eyes. Now for the eyelashes, for the detail, I'm going to make another new layer here, and I'm going to use the smudge tool. I like to use the smudge tool because the smudge tool tends to want to smudge things out to a point. You know, you point out like this, you see how it kind of goes out to a little point in there? And that's the way we want our eyelashes to be, is to come out to little points like that, okay? And so, and in addition to that, I'll change the retouching brush. We've been using this first brush all the way around here, and the differences, I have time, yeah, I do have a little time to show you the differences between the brushes. Make another new layer here. All right, this first series of brushes, soft and hard, has the same size brush from top to bottom and side to side, no matter how hard, whoops, I'm in the wrong tool, no matter how hard you press down. Let me get out of the smudge and into this one. Okay, make it a little bit bigger here, okay, like that. And then the second brush over is the same brush with a hard edge. This next brush over has size to pressure, which means that if I press down a little bit, I have a little skinny brush, and if I push down harder, I get a fatter one, and when I release it, I get a beautiful edge to an eyelash, see? Just like that. This other brush is the same, but it's harder. So those are the two brushes that I use primarily for retouching. This last series is opacity to pressure, which means that if you push down a little bit, you don't get a lot of opacity. You push down more, you get more, okay? So what I do is I've got our new layer made here. I'm going to use this brush for 90% of my retouching. This brush is what I'm going to be using to make eyelashes and hair. So we're going to be using the smudge tool. We'll pick up this little brush that comes to the point, and then we'll get a little small brush here to make an eyelash. And if I pull it out, I can just go and flip out an eyelash. And you don't see very much here because it's just pulling out the color that's there. But if in the layers window, I take the mode of this from normal and turn it into multiply, you're going to see I've got a much bigger eyelash that just popped up over here, see? That's just by changing the blending mode. So coming through here with a little brush like this, I can kind of flip up some little eyelashes, going around just like that, filling them in, and they may look a little obvious at this point. Everyone's saying, oh, I was with you until you did that, Jane, and now all of a sudden. So anyway, you come through like this, and then with the eyelashes, if they're a little bit too sharp, you can add a slight blur. That would be filter, blur, Gaussian blur. And I start by adding maybe 1 pixel, and I'm comparing these eyelashes to the surrounding ones. And right now they're a little bit softer than that. So I'm going to do a 0.5. I want it to be just a little bit sharper than the other hairs that I see around it. And then I would click OK, and then reduce the layer opacity to 0, and then bring it back up until you get just the right amount of eyelashes, but they don't look obvious. So that basically is what I did for making the eyes. And you can see that this is what happened here. And you can see I actually did a little line through here as well, little details. And I worked in a few extra hairs through his eyebrow area as well. Great technique if something's a little bit out of focus on a person or an animal, you can just kind of like add a little bit of detail here and there. So is that good so far? Did that answer questions?
Absolutely superb.
Okay, and then coming in here, we've got the more enhances. I still wanted to bring the highlights out at the top here. So what I did to do that is I made another image adjustment layer, put it into screen blending mode, hid it behind the layer mask, and using the brush tool with this second brush at about 20% opacity and 100% flow. and white is the foreground color. Woo, that must be 100%. Yeah, it's 100%. Well, I'll show you what I'm doing with it, okay? At 100%, I'm coming through like this, and I'm just going over the existing highlights, just like that, okay? But I'm doing it at 20% opacity instead, so that what you're going to see is a much more gradual buildup of the white. And I can just kind of build it through here and kind of coming around like that. You see what I'm doing is actually lighting up his hair, which is what I did here, very softly. Now even, I'll tell you, even this, if I did it at 100% overkill, let's just kind of continue through here. If I went ahead and I did all of this, and you're thinking to yourself, oh man, you know, that looks terrible and everything, you can always say to yourself, because like here you can see my definitive brush strokes. So if they were too sharp looking, you could blur the mask here. So that would be filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and you can just blur the mask as much as you want, see? Blur it right out if you need to, like that. Or you can reduce the layer opacity to 0 and then bring it back up until you get the intensity that you want to see. So it's pretty forgiving to do your retouching like that. And like I say, all my retouching techniques are pretty simple to do, but they're very powerful when you see what you can do with them. So, you know, to get that done. And then with him, too, you know, sometimes when you have something that's got a lot of good texture to it and you want to bring out a lot of the power of a feeling, but you don't want to have color in there, you know, drop it down to black and white. And remember that when you go into the black and white, you see you're getting a more intense gaze out of him because he's got a pretty strong look going on here. And so I get more of that by going into black and white. But I felt that it was a little too cool for him, so I added a color balance here. And the color balance that I added on this one was I added just +5 red and -5 yellow. And that just took the edge off of the black and white. And then, as I was looking at them, I thought, well, you know, that texture is looking really good. I thought, oh, you know, what the heck, let's go for it and throw in some structure. And that just really kind of added the finishing touch that threw in a lot more of the grit to it, you know. And so some of the things that you do, you try to go with the whole look of the picture. You know, sometimes pictures are strong and textury, and other times they're very soft and delicate. So you can see that retouching that I did for this, to make him really strong might be different. Here we have, for this, here's another one. Okay, this is one of Rick Bauer's here again, beautiful classic photographer. And this is a very soft look. In fact, this was just blurred almost, just really, really soft, just soft and pink and everything. And this one here, we have all the retouching. We have her on layers we have here. She was gone in. There's really very little retouching on her, just a little bit on the eyes and things. There we got the shoulder toned down. You got to watch those little details there. But then this one, of course, is done very delicately on pink with a piece of torn paper and a little border around it in a very classic sense. A little pink vignette around the outside edge. This one probably be around the 80, scored around an 80 maybe. Let's see what else I have here that's kind of interesting to look at. Oh, this one was interesting to do. This one scored, entered it in England. It just got a bronze. It didn't score particularly high, and I think it's just because it's a pretty simple image. But the before and after here there's before and after, like that. Okay, so the bangs did get longer. Okay, the eye enhancement was done the same as the other one, but I just moved the lines around differently to give her more of that kind of that retro look and the big long eyelashes and things like that. Now, so I know somebody's going to ask me about the bangs, so I've got to tell you how easy. I'll show you kind of how I did this. What I did with this one is I went into, let's see, I think I went into black and white on this one. And what I did is I kind of boosted up the reds and the yellows. And you see, this is what's going to give you those little light skin tones like that. And so I bleached out the skin tones by going into the black and white and boosting it up like this, okay? And then I just reduced the opacity of this somewhat so that it gave me that tinted bleached skin. Okay, so here's where we're going, see? See how she's coming along? And so then, because I have a layer mask that is associated with this, I was able to come in with black paint at 100% opacity and 100% flow. And I'm able to remove all of that bleachiness from the snake and the other fingernails and things like this. It came through like that. Kind of coming down like that. So you can see that's kind of what happened there. Do you see? That's how it got from there to there. Now the other little trick on that, once I've got the adjustments and everything the way that I wanted it to be, then I did a stamp visible, which is a Shift, Option, Command, the letter N for never, E for ever. Never ever do you remember it unless you write it down. Shift, Option, Command, N, E, or Shift, Alt, Control, N, E. And that just stamped a visible full layer of this adjustment with the background on it. So I've got everything on one layer again. And then I'm able here now to work on the bangs area, which I did just with the little lasso tool, and I kind of came around like this, and I took her little bangs and the edge of the bangs, a little bit of the skin like that, okay? And then I did a select. I never pre-feather because I like to choose what I want afterwards, and I always forget I have something in there, and sometimes I'll make a selection that's already feathered 15 pixels and I only wanted 5. So I choose afterwards to go select, modify, feather, and I'll pick up maybe 5 pixels, click OK, and then I'll make a new layer via copy. And then if you do an edit free transform, you can just grab the bangs and kind of pull them down. Okay, I did not have to do any tidy up in this case at all. Sometimes you have to tidy up around the edges. If you needed to, you just add a little layer mask to it like that and come up and kind of work around the edge here. Okay, so and then I finished up the eye enhancements as before, filled in a couple of little hairs here and there, and she was pretty much done. So in working from start to finish, it's just always taking every little thing from one step all the way along, kind of thinking your way through these images until you can come up with the very best that that particular image has to offer you. Let's see. Any questions yet coming in?
Yes, of course, Jane.
A couple
folks asked about how did going back a couple of images. How did you do your torn paper edge?
The torn paper edge. Okay, well, let's just pull this one up. She's an interesting one. Here's another one that's more powerful in black and white, rather. See? Okay, just the black and white, and then the black and white. I brought the reds up a lot so that her little shawl got lighter. And she looked pretty cool. All right, so let's say we're going to present this then. Can we go just a couple minutes over?
Okay.
Okay, all right. So say we have our file that we're going to do, and it's going to be like an 8 by 10. Let me see, height 8. Let me see, width 8, height 10, like this, 300. Okay, we'll do that. Let me just shift back here. So we're going to have our little image here that we've got, and let me go ahead and flatten it. And then we can pull it over onto this other paper. So see, this is going to be my little background here that I've got to have. So in preparing this for a display, we choose the type of edges that we want to have. Now, the particular piece of paper that I used on that other image was a piece of paper that I got from Graphic Authority. They have a lot of really cool paper backings and things like that, and you can just bring in the paper and pop it right in on that. But you can create your own edges on this as well in a variety of different ways. Sometimes what I like to do on some of mine is just do a rough edge, whereas I've got my picture here, and I'll just take the lasso tool, and in holding down the Option key, you can kind of just come in and just do a little irregular edge around the outside edge like this. And then as you come down to the bottom, this kind of looks kind of cool. You can run filters on it and everything. There's like a whole lot of stuff you can do with these little edges, but just sometimes I find that I like to have a very definitive edge on things, and other times I like to have something that's a little bit more soft. And on this one, I'm going to go for something, I think, a little bit more soft, and kind of coming up like this. There we go. So now I'm going to then add my little layer mask to this, and you can see I've got my little edge like that, and I'll kind of inspect it at this point. Now, if I want this edge to be a little bit softer on this, I'm just going to blur the mask, and that would be Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and then I can just decide how much I want it blurred. If you want fake torn paper, you could then apply this mask and then run wind on the outside edges of it. But what I'm more inclined to do on this one is just kind of do that. And then I'm going to apply the mask, and then we can add a little inner or outer glow. I wanted to get a little bit into the presentation here too on this, where I can show you a couple of things here. Let me make a new layer here and behind our picture. And on the background here, let's just go ahead and get a little soft gray. Let's pick one from the image. Okay. And then I'll do, that's a pretty good one right there. All right, so now above it here, I might want to do a texture, a pattern overlay. So that would be layer style, and we'll just go into a pattern overlay here and just pick a pattern. Something like that. Let's go ahead and go for it. Oh, sorry, I did something wrong. Let me duplicate this. Now we'll do the pattern overlay. I think I had to have something on it. I wasn't thinking in this mode at the moment here. There we go. That's what we want. So we can take our little pattern overlay, pick one that we kind of like, and scale it. You get what you like. And then what I normally will do here is I'll take it and apply it just in, say, soft light or overlay, and then you can see the color underneath it. So if this color, say, were pink, let's just show you that. And this is in overlay. Ah, it's not doing it. Oh, that's because it is fill. Okay. All right. I'm sorry. I screwed that up. But edit fill. Let's go back to our gray here. All right, I added a color overlay on top of the same color so you couldn't see it on the gray. I'm sorry. But so now we've got this, and I'll bring it down and just bring this up a little bit until you get just the right amount of texture that you want to see there. And then underneath this one, the picture itself on the layer style, we'll do maybe an outer glow and pick up a deeper color and click OK, and change the blending mode from screen to normal so you can see it. And then you can get your little size spread here and the opacity. That. Click OK. And begin to work up a presentation. In the end, you generally will bring out rulers from the sides here, and I begin to measure my borders around the outside. And then with the rectangular marquee, measure them to take the time, make it good, make it correct. And then I'm going to take black paint and do an edit stroke, and maybe stroke it with 3 pixels to start with. Okay. View clear guides. You have a little piping around the edge there. Put everything on a separate layer, and then that way you have leeway to do things that you want to do with it later on, or eliminate it, or however you see it happening, and begin to come up with a finished piece. Now, what I want to do is explain to you too is that when you are entering these things in competition, try to find out how they're going to be viewed, because if this particular image is going to be viewed on a gray background, then you're not going to see the edges of my picture against it. So if it's going to be the same, you're not going to see my edge. So that means that on my background copy layer here, you know, I'm going to have to add like an inner glow or something around the outside edge. In fact, I probably would do it on a separate layer. And if we do a select all on this again, you can add something around the outside edge that's going to set it off. You know, you could do it with a piping, you could do it with a little shadow coming in or something like that. I'm just going to do a little bit of a piping around the outside here. Again, I'll stroke it. This time I'm going to do about 15 pixels and click OK. And then I'm going to blur it just a little bit around the edges here, like that, and then reduce the opacity to 0 so that just around the edges there's going to be just a little bit of a separation. It's particularly dangerous if you've got an image that's shown on black, and in fact I may have one, see if I've got it in here that I can show you. This one over here. Let's just show this and view clear guides. Okay, you see that viewing it on black, you see that you can't see where the edge of my picture is. And so if the judging criteria for this is going to be a digital judging and it's going to be shown on black, you're not going to see my edges. So that's when it becomes important. And let me just do the same thing I did before just because it's so quick here. We'll just go ahead and select all, and let me just go to white paint and we'll do the edit stroke. Okay, filter blur. And let me just take it down so you can't see it. And you want to check it out before you send it in too, because I don't want to really see it so much in here. But if you see it against black, then you see what I'm getting around the outside edge. And I would check it like this, and I'd say, oh, that looks okay, but I think that the white is still too strong. It's too strong now, so I'm going to back up, and I'm going to reduce this from 17% down to about 7%, and then check it out again. And maybe a little bit too light this time, so I'm going to have to bring it up just a little bit more. So you just want to make sure that you're giving people the benefit of seeing your entire image. And so that just goes into trying to find out and ask questions. If you're going to enter it in competition, you know, you're reading all the rules, and everybody's rules are different. If you enter in the Professional Photographers of America, for instance, you can go to their website at ppa.com, and you can get a listing of 12 steps to great photography, and it gives you their judging criteria. And then other associations, of course, will have their own judging criteria. So try to get, you know, educate yourself as much as possible so that you know what you're going up against when you are getting into competition. And the more knowledge you have up front, then the better your images are going to do, because you're going to know what you're shooting for. So, and if you don't have a Wacom, you need one. It's the difference between creating art with a pen and a potato. So, any other questions?
Jane, we could go on for hours, so we're going to call it quits questions since we're already over.
Okay, it is, and also I do make DVDs through my site or through Photoshop Cafe. These are some of my upcoming classes that are coming around. All the details are on my website at janecz.com. My email's on there. Drop me a line if you've got any questions, or if you want me to do a little tutorial on a torn edge for you guys, because I didn't have time to really go through that really well for you guys today, you know, just drop me a little line, or Joe, if you want, I can send you the tutorial on a torn edge and you can send it out to everybody. Would you rather me do that? Okay, yeah, I'll show you how to make a little torn edge on that, and any the details on all these classes to what I'm teaching and all this other stuff is through different associations and things throughout the U.S. and Canada for the summer here, and check them out and get in touch with me. I'm happy to say hi.
Jane, that was wonderful. Thank you so much. The questions that came through, everybody loved it. So many people said it was the best webinar ever, so kudos to you, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Joe. And Wes, thank you for taking the time to be here today.
Yeah, and Wes, join us, please.
Oh, yes, thank you very much, Jane. Always a pleasure to watch you work, and I definitely picked up a few things along the way as well.
All right, well, again, Wes, thank you from Wacom. Jane, thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you when you're up here in New York.
Me too, and thank everybody for showing up today. I had a great time. Anytime. Just let me know when you want me.
Thank you all. Thanks, everybody, for the great questions, and we hope to see you online again soon. So until next time, everybody keep shooting and be well. Bye-bye.
Ciao, ciao.